Hello again, good morning. Excuse my finger there. So this is where I get to tell you a little bit of who I am and what I'm about. Excuse me again. I'm driving again. So if you see a lot of movement, a lot of moving my head, a lot of not looking at you, it's because of that. Well, like I said yesterday, my name is Crystal. I was born in Sacramento. At about 3 months, my mom and dad decided to split up for other reasons, and my dad decided to bring me down to Orange County, where he proceeded to leave me with my godmother for the first, 10 years of my life, because he decided that he needed to work on himself and, be able to sustain me. And of course, I was with him every weekend and whatnot, and which is okay, because at least he wasn't out of my life completely, but he wasn't really in my life at all, only the weekends. Saturday morning to Sunday afternoon is what I mean by weekends. Come on, people, move. So that was the thing, and within the time, he met a new woman from his hometown, and they decided, they fell in love, I guess, and they got married. At first, this woman was the very definition of a stepmother. She was mean to me. She would deny me as her own, obviously, with reasons. She would force feed me. She would mentally abuse me. She would, rarely, but she would physically abuse me, like hit me and pull my ear, and whatnot. Ways that she thought she was educating me or keeping me in line in some way, I considered very damaging to me, because there were physical abuse all in all. She would verbally abuse me in the matter of, she would, every time she and my dad had a fight, or my dad would be mad at her for a reason, she would blame it on me. If my dad couldn't buy her something at the store, she would blame it on me. She was just very abusive like that. And in terms of my living situation, I was living with my godparents, and their 3 children. So in that order, they had 2 children older than me, and then one child my age. So I was just a couple months older than this other kid. And to say the least, I wasn't very safe in that environment either, because I was sexually abused in that environment. So as far as I knew, I didn't really have a safe home. I had one home where I was being sexually abused and verbally abused by my older cousin or whatever, and in the other environment, I was being mentally and verbally abused by, my stepmother. So I really, had a really rough start. So like any kid with a rough start, I was a rebel. At first, I was very smart, very into school. I was very responsible, like the bookworm and everything. And then my teens hit, and I became a rebel. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to go to school. I graduated high school, thank God, because if not, I don't know where I would be right now without at least my high school education. I proceeded to, as soon as I graduated high school, I started my first job at McDonald's. Typical, I know. I found I met the father of my 2 eldest children at McDonald's. I didn't think it was anything serious at first. I was like, oh, I just met this guy and he seems like he's into, being sleeping around or whatever. And I'm like, okay. So I really didn't take him seriously. And then we became exclusive, and he was very nice to me, and he was very sweet, and he was, in my eyes, the best boyfriend ever. And then maybe when I was 20, we went out for like a year. And then when I was 20, I lost my virginity to him. And another typical story out of that, I became pregnant with my first baby. Now, I became pregnant with my first baby, and I decided to keep that a secret as long as possible. He obviously knew, and I was taking care of myself, obviously. But I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my godparents. I didn't tell anybody because of the lack of confidence that was there. I didn't really, for obvious reasons, I really didn't have any. I couldn't really confide in any of the adults in my life. So I kind of kept it a secret until the obvious started happening. I started growing a belly bump. So they started asking me questions. They asked me why I didn't tell them, blah, 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 blah. And then all in all, they were happy that I was, obviously a baby's a blessing. And they were a little disappointed, but they were happy. My stepmother proceeded to come up to me and said, if you end up getting pregnant by this low life ever again, you're going to end up in the street along with your kids. And I'm like, okay. Well, that scared me because I really didn't have anywhere to go. I was still working at McDonald's at this point in time. I was being careless with my money. So I really didn't have much of a choice but not to get pregnant, right? Oh shit, I was just hit. Okay. So I just got a little love tap from the car behind me and everything is fine. But anyways, so she proceeded to tell me that if I ever got pregnant by this low life, she would obviously kick me out. And then next thing you know, I'm pregnant. And I had those words in mind where she told me that I would be out on the street and my kids would be out on the street, when I didn't want to be.
Just in case anything, my number's Scott.
Sure, thank you. And that was the man that just hit me, Scott. He gave me it's a Kia. It's a great Kia. And I don't know if I was able to catch that, but he gave me his number just in case of anything. But it was a very, 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 very non-existent hit. So, anyways, I found out I was pregnant for a second time, and this is where his true color started to come out. The father of my children's true color started to come out. He was not working. He was really not taking care of his first child, and I was in love with him, so I didn't really see any of that. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, he's the father of my children. I love him, and that's fine as long as I'm working. The babies are okay. Well, much like the first child, I kept this child a secret too. For the whole pregnancy, I wore baggy clothes. I was almost never home, so nobody could see me. I didn't even tell the father of my children that I was pregnant, because I didn't mention it, but because with my first baby, he wanted me to get an abortion, which I didn't get, obviously. So because of that, I didn't even tell him, because I felt that he would want a second abortion and he'd want me to have an abortion again, which I was so against it, because I grew up Catholic and with the fear of God, that if I did have an abortion, it would be the worst thing in the world. But anyways, I didn't tell anybody for the whole 8.5 months because I was scared. I wore baggy clothes. I was never home. I was, it was a very, very dark time for me because I didn't even go to the doctor. I didn't do anything until one morning my water broke and I was in my room in my dad's house. I was in my room, leaking water everywhere. My contractions started to come. I finally told my stepmother was the only one home at that time, so I told her, and we called my uncle so he can take us to the emergency room. And it just so happens that my oldest baby, which was a couple months old still, she was sick. She was throwing up the whole night, and then after my water broke, she had been throwing up for a while. So we decided to take her in. And I proceeded to go to labor and delivery. So she had like some stomach flu or something like that. So my stepmother went in with her, and I went into labor and delivery all by myself. It was very scary. It's not something that I ever wanted to go through. It's not something that I ever wanted anybody else to go through. And so I proceeded to have my baby, whatever. I took the heat from everybody. I dealt with the consequences of my family approaching me with, why didn't you tell anybody? What if you died? What if the baby died? You're lucky everything came up, as good as it did. Everything. So even more of a reason to feel bad about myself, right? Another thing that I didn't mention was throughout my youth, throughout when I was in high school and everything, I was very depressed. As much as I was a rebel, I was depressed, and I had a couple suicide attempts because I felt like if my dad didn't want me, then why would anybody want me? And I was just causing problems for everybody. And if I went, or if I died, there would be no more problems for anybody. Luckily those attempts didn't, they all failed. So thankfully, because I'm still here. So that was the story of my second baby. Well, like the true genius that I was, I fell pregnant with his kid a third time. Now, this time I decided to take matters into my own hands, and I had an abortion. If you don't remember, just a second ago I said I was against abortions. Well, up until the third time I was pregnant. So I did have an abortion. This is the most hardest decision of my life. That must have been the hardest decision of my life, was to have that abortion. Because this is a baby that I was not giving a chance to. I could have done so many other things, but I just felt like the easiest thing was to have an abortion. And from that abortion, everything else went downhill with my relationship with him, because he thought I was cheating on him. He thought the only reason that I was getting an abortion was because the baby wasn't his. He even came to think that my second kid wasn't his. And we went to get a DNA test because he was obviously not there when I gave birth, so he didn't send the birth certificate. So in order to establish paternity, he went and got a DNA test, which I was sure was positive, because he was the only, up until that point, he was the only person that I had slept with. So it was downhill, he started getting into drugs, and he started caring less about even getting a job or about getting his driver's license and stuff like that. And it was just a downward spiral, and a very dark one, to a downward spiral to a very dark place. I started getting into heavy drinking. I got into drugs too, but not heavily. It was just bad, and then I started sleeping around. not for money or anything. Just if I met a guy on Facebook, or I got some guy's number, I would obviously text him and meet up with him and sleep with him. And then out of the blue, I got this message from one of my old high school friends that was my best friend's boyfriend back in high school. At this point, I don't even talk to anybody from high school or any of my so-called best friends. But yeah. And let's just say he's the guy I'm with right now. He's my husband. We got married. We'd been married going on 4 years, I want to say. And that's another story that I want to tell. But for now, I'm going to leave off right here. This is where I'm going to end it for now. I want to thank you, anybody's listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing me out. If you have any questions, any comments, go ahead and leave them for me. I'm very, very new to this, so if there's anything that I'm doing wrong, if there anything that you want me to do, let me know. Comment. Like I said, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see where this takes us.